You've got until sundown to clear out. I won't tell you again.
Sundown? But a blizzard's coming. I've got nowhere to go.
Not my concern. The cabin's mine, and I need it empty now.
2 years I've been here. I kept this place up. You can't just throw me out.
I can, and I am. Now go, before I have you removed.
Daniel turned his back on the cabin and headed into the forest, Scout walking close beside him.
Leaves. Dry leaves piled 3 feet thick. That's all I need.
He remembered a survival manual, a debris hut insulated with layers of packed leaves.
We are going to build it, Scout. Something that keeps us alive.
As the first snow began to fall, he gathered armfuls of dry leaves, the old lesson hardening into a plan. Daniel worked through the falling snow, packing handfuls of leaves into the framework until it began to take shape.
3 feet thick. That's what the book said. Enough to stop the wind.
By nightfall, the mound rose like a small hill, a low entrance barely visible beneath the packed leaves. He heard a voice on the wind, cruel and careless. Looks like a den for a beast, not a man.
Let them laugh. The leaves are my walls now.
As the snow thickened, he crawled into the narrow entrance, Scout pressing after him. Inside, the space was cramped but sealed. He lit a small tallow candle, the first warmth in hours. The flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on the leaf walls. Scout curled at his feet, a living blanket.
We made it, boy. Just in time.
Outside, the snow fell harder, burying the world in white. But beneath the leaves, Daniel and Scout waited, the coming storm a question yet to answer. The blizzard struck just after midnight, a wall of wind that shook the ground and buried the forest in driving white. Inside, Daniel pulled Scout tighter, the dog's warmth a small anchor against the mounting scream of the storm. A cold sliver sliced across his neck. The wind had found a seam. He traced the cold to a small gap where the packed leaves had shifted apart. He forced frozen moss and more leaves into the crack, packing it until his fingers grew numb. The draft vanished, but the hut now felt thinner, a fragile shell against the blizzard's weight. Outside, the wind shrieked through the trees, snapping limbs and throwing snow like shattered glass.
If the leaves fail, we're finished. Nothing else can stop it.
The candle flame bent sideways for a heartbeat, then steadied, the dark sealing them in again. The hours bled into one long roar, the storm's fury the only measure of time. Daniel did not close his eyes. By the second day, the blizzard still raged. Daniel chewed a strip of dried meat, counting what remained.
4 days of food left, maybe less.
Scout nudged his hand, and Daniel gave him half of his own share. Outside, the wind slammed a heavy branch against the hut, and the whole structure shuddered.
Easy, boy. It'll hold.
The cold seeped past the leaves, and he wrapped an extra cloth around Scout. Then himself, he heard a tree crack and fall nearby, and he wondered how long the leaf walls could last.
The leaves keep the wind out, but not the cold. Not entirely.
He pictured the cabin he'd been thrown from, the fire he might have lit there, and the despair turned sharp. But then he looked at Scout, still breathing, still warm, and he refused to let the doubt win. The temperature outside kept plummeting. Ice crystals formed on his water bottle, and his breath grew brittle. He pressed his hand into the floor of leaves and paused. They were less cold than the air above. A faint, earthy smell rose from the pile, like damp soil in the first thaw, a sign of life underground.
That smell, it's more than just old leaves. Something's working down there. Must be body heat. Mine and Scout's, trapped in the insulation.
Scout sniffed the pile and wagged his tail, but the subtle warmth persisted, even when they shifted. A heavy branch cracked and fell against the shelter. The walls groaned but held.
Cabins in the valley are failing, but this pile of leaves is still standing.
A new drip of icy water hit his neck. He found the gap and stuffed more moss into the seam. He sat back, watching a thin wisp of steam rise from the leaves. He didn't understand it yet, but he felt a stubborn hope. A monstrous oak groaned and collapsed against the shelter. The walls buckled inward, then held unbroken. Daniel listened, chest tight, and realized the leaves had absorbed the blow like a living mattress.
A cabin would have shattered. This is better than timber.
He pictured the sturdy lodge down the trail, its roof now a tangle of splintered beams under the snow. Scout's ears pricked at a scratching beyond the leaves, but Daniel placed a hand on his flank.
Easy. Nothing's getting through these walls.
The scratching faded, and for the first time, Daniel felt the hut not as a fragile nest, but as a fortress.
The leaves aren't just holding the cold out, they're holding something else in.
A small smile touched his cracked lips. The hope that had been a flicker now burned steady. Outside, the blizzard screamed on, but Daniel stopped fearing each gust. He started trusting. The blizzard still raged, but Daniel began to dig into the leaf bed, searching for the source of the warmth.
There's something at the center. I can feel it.
His fingers met a pocket of steady heat, like the flank of a living animal. He pulled back a layer and saw the leaves had broken down into a dark, steaming compost.
It's composting. The leaves are rotting and making heat.
The leaves weren't just insulation. They were a slow furnace, feeding on their own decay.
This changes everything. We can survive as long as the leaves keep breaking down.
He buried his hands in the warm compost, and the ache left his fingers for the first time since the storm. Scout nudged closer, drawn by the heat, and Daniel pulled him onto the mound. Outside, the wind howled, but the hut had become a living chamber, warmed from below. Daniel rearranged the leaves, creating a deeper hollow over the warm compost core.
If I keep the top loose and the sides tight, the heat rises slow and even.
Scout stretched out on the mound, his coat dry and fluffy, his eyes half closed.
Look at you. Spoiled already. Best bed we've had in weeks.
Outside, the storm beat against the mound, but inside, the walls felt like a second coat.
Wind can't touch us here. The leaves drink it up.
For the first time since the eviction, Daniel slept through the night.
I've done it. A house of leaves. And it's better than any cabin I've known.
Scout wagged his tail, and Daniel shared the last of the meat, no longer counting the days. The storm had months yet, but the hut had become a home, and nothing outside could change that. The blizzard swelled into a white monster, snapping century-old pines like twigs. A distant crash, a barn roof collapsing under the weight, reached him through the din. Later, he glimpsed a dead deer half buried beside the trail, frozen solid mid-stride.
Sturdy homes are death traps now. And my heap of leaves still breathes.
The leaf mound, buried under 3 feet of snow, glowed faintly. A small defiance. He overheard a rescue party shouting, a whole family lost when their roof caved in.
They mocked me as an animal, but the animals survived this better.
The pile that looked like a beast's den was the warmest place for miles. Solitude pressed in, colder than the snow, but he was alive. That was enough. The worst winter in decades was claiming everything, except a simple mound of leaves. A sudden lull settled over the forest, and in the stillness, a terrible cry clawed through the dark. Scout shot to his feet, barking fiercely toward the entrance, every hair on his neck standing rigid. Daniel's heart seized. He crawled to the opening and peered into the white waste. A figure staggered 50 yards off, half buried in a drift, one arm raised in a desperate wave.
He'll die out there in minutes. But if I go, I might not find my way back.
The warmth of the hut wrapped around him like a grip. He could stay safe, let nature take its course.
But I wasn't cast out only to become the man who let another freeze.
He grabbed his coat, hands shaking, and turned to Scout, who was still barking at the dark.
Stay, boy. Guard the den. I'll be back.
And then he pushed through the entrance, into the storm's teeth, the cry still ringing in his ears. The wind lashed his face blind, but Daniel found the half-buried figure and gripped his coat like a lifeline.
On your feet. I won't let you die here.
He dragged the dead weight through the drifts, each step a battle against the wind's fury. Scout's frantic barking guided him the last few yards into the den's dark mouth. Inside, he collapsed beside the stranger, both panting clouds, the warmth barely touching their frozen skin.
Barely breathing. He needs the leaves' heat now.
He stripped off his own damp coat, and wrapped the stranger in his last dry blanket. Then he dragged the man onto the compost mound and packed fresh leaves tight against his back. Scout crept close, whining, and Daniel let himself breathe for the first time since the cry. The storm howled outside, but now 2 heartbeats shared the fragile heat beneath the leaves. Daniel pressed 2 fingers to the stranger's neck and felt a weak, fluttering pulse.
Still alive, but barely. I won't let the cold take you now.
He placed a morsel of dried meat on the man's tongue and dripped melted snow onto his cracked lips.
He needs water, but I can barely melt a mouthful at a time.
Then he checked the man's hands, finding white, waxy patches that spoke of deep frostbite.
The frostbite is deep. If his fingers don't pinken soon.
Scout stretched across the stranger's legs, a warm, furry blanket, pressing close without being told.
Good boy, Scout. Keep him warm. Just a little longer.
The man's breathing steadied into a slow, even rhythm, and the tightness in Daniel's chest eased a fraction. Outside, the wind clawed at the mound, but inside, the compost's heat cradled them both through the long night. Daniel did not sleep. All night he watched the stranger's chest rise and fall, the storm battering the mound.
Without the leaves' heat, we'd both be frozen solid by now.
He packed fresh leaves around the stranger, sealing the gaps against the probing wind outside. The blizzard shook the mountain, but the mound only settled deeper, the leaf walls thickening under the weight. A pale gray light eventually seeped through the snow-packed entrance, and Daniel blew out the candle. The stranger stirred, his frozen eyelids slowly cracking open to narrow slits.
Easy now. You are safe.
The man's gaze wandered, uncomprehending, as if he'd crawled back from a place beyond names.
He doesn't even know where he is. The frost must have stolen his memory.
But his pulse was stronger now, and his breath no longer rattled. The leaves had bought them one more dawn. Slowly, the stranger's eyes focused, clearing the haze of unconsciousness, and fixed on Daniel's face.
That face. I know that face. The man I cast out before the storm.
Daniel saw the awareness ignite in the man's gaze, and his own expression grew still.
Michael Hartley, the one who threw me out.
You are the one I evicted.
And you are the man who left me to die.
The accusation hung in the cramped space, heavy as the snow outside, and Scout let out a soft, uneasy whine.
I saved the man who tried to kill me. What do I do with that?
Michael's cracked lips parted, but no words came, only a tremor that spoke of shame and disbelief. Outside, the wind moaned, but within the leaf walls, a heavier silence settled, the weight of unpaid debts and an uncertain mercy.
I was wrong. Throwing you out was a death sentence. I see that now.
The words came out in a ragged whisper, brittle as frost, and Daniel listened without flinching.
I thought only of my needs, not what it would do to you. Please, forgive me.
You are alive. That's what matters right now.
He didn't offer absolution, but he reached into his coat and held out the last strip of dried meat. Michael's trembling fingers closed around it, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the storm waned, and faint daylight pressed into the hut, chasing away the worst of the dark.
Thank you. I don't deserve any of this.
Scout lifted his head and gave a soft wag, as if declaring a fragile truce. Nothing was settled, but the hatred had lost its edge, replaced by the simpler need to endure together. The wind had softened to a whisper, and the snow no longer hammered the entrance.
How did this pile of leaves keep us alive? My cabin would be an icebox.
3 feet of dry leaves. Each one traps a pocket of air. The wind can't steal the heat.
He dug his hand into the floor and pulled up a fistful of dark, steaming compost.
And this is why. The bottom leaves are rotting. That rot makes heat, like a slow-burning fire.
Michael reached out and touched the warm pile, then pulled his hand back as if burned by the truth.
Incredible. I've never seen anything like it. This is why we didn't freeze.
He looked at Daniel not as a beggar, but as the keeper of a knowledge that had saved his life.
I threw you out thinking you had nothing, but you had this. You knew how to survive.
The air in the hut shifted. They were no longer a victor and evicted, but one man who had much to learn, and another who had taught without intending to.
I want to repay you. Money, land, whatever you need.
I don't want your money. I did what I did because it was right.
Michael stared at the steaming compost, then back at Daniel, as if seeing him for the first time.
Then take the cabin. The same one I evicted you from. It's yours.
The words hit harder than the blizzard. Daniel's hand froze on Scout's fur.
The cabin. He's giving me the cabin I called home for 2 years.
You kept us alive with nothing but leaves. The cabin is a small price.
Scout whined, nudging Daniel's hand, as if urging him to accept. After a long silence, Daniel took Michael's hand. Not as a beggar, but as a man who had nothing left to prove. Outside, the world lay white and silent, but inside, a promise had been planted, one that would outlast the winter. The storm had broken. Pale sunlight spilled over the frozen world, turning the drifts into a sea of diamonds.
I'll bring the deed myself as soon as the trails are clear. You have my word.
Words are light. I'll believe it when I see the deed.
Michael nodded, his breath misting in the cold, then turned and trudged toward the distant tree line. Daniel watched until the figure disappeared into the white, then exhaled and crawled back inside.
A promise from a man who once threw me out. But for now, the leaves are still my walls.
Scout nudged his hand, tail wagging, as if to say they'd endured worse than broken promises.
You are right, boy. We'll keep going. This hill of leaves has kept us alive so far.
He poked the compost, releasing a fresh curl of steam, and added another layer of leaves to the mound. The cabin was a promise on the wind, but for now, this burrow beneath the snow was home. Winter clung to the mountain, but Daniel survived on the compost's steady, hidden warmth, week after week. One spring morning, as the first snowmelt dripped from the branches, a well-dressed stranger appeared in the clearing. He carried a leather satchel and an envelope sealed with wax, the mark of a legal firm. Daniel broke the seal. Inside was a deed, the cabin's title, signed over by Michael Hartley himself.
He actually did it. The cabin. It's really mine.
His hands trembled. He had to lean against the leaf mound for support.
2 winters ago, I crawled out of that cabin with nothing. Now it's coming back to me.
He signed the acceptance, and the stranger nodded, leaving behind only a copy and the key. Scout barked and spun in circles, as if he understood the promise had finally become real. Daniel held the deed against his chest, the paper still crisp, and for the first time in years, he felt unburdened. The next morning, Daniel walked the familiar path back to the cabin, the deed heavy in his pocket.
Same door I was thrown out of. Now it's mine to open.
The door swung open without protest, and the musty air greeted him like an old, forgotten friend. He spent the day sweeping out the cold ashes and patching a loose shutter, his hands remembering the work. Scout sniffed every corner, tail wagging, as if reclaiming territory they'd once lost. By evening, a fire crackled in the hearth, and the cabin wrapped them in a warmth Daniel hadn't felt since his eviction. Through the window, the distant leaf mound still rose from the forest floor, already greening with new growth.
That hill of leaves kept us alive. I won't tear it down.
And so he left the mound standing, a monument woven from fallen leaves and sheer will. The cabin was home again, but the leaves would forever be the lesson that brought him back. As the sun sank low, Daniel sat on the cabin porch, Scout resting his head on his knee. Across the field, the leaf mound stood, its top still peaked, the compost inside slowly turning to soil.
I built it with my own hands, from nothing but dead leaves, and it gave me back everything.
The same leaves that passers-by mocked as an animal's nest had kept him alive through the deadliest winter, and in the end, they'd not only saved him, they'd earned him his home.
Funny how the hand you are dealt can turn into a gift.
He scratched Scout's ears, and the dog's tail thumped a slow, contented rhythm. For a long moment, he simply breathed, letting the peace settle over him like a second skin. Then he smiled, a quiet, earned smile that had been a long time coming. The lesson was simple. Sometimes the thing the world discards is exactly what you need to survive. Daniel rose from the porch, Scout springing up beside him, ready to follow wherever he led. They walked across the greening field, the same path he had stumbled down months ago, now steady and sure. The leaf mound rose before them, still tall, still holding the shape of the shelter that had saved them.
Every leaf in this hill was a brick I laid with my own 2 hands.
Scout sniffed the base, tail wagging, remembering the den that kept him warm. Daniel looked back toward the cabin, smoke curling from its chimney, then at the mound. The two stood like bookends, one of timber and toil, the other of fallen leaves and faith. A light breeze stirred the leaves, and Daniel closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. Then he opened his eyes, patted Scout, and stood for a moment, a man at home at last. Some shelters are built with walls. The best ones are built with what you refuse to let go.